got some folks on already. So I think we can probably go ahead and get started and at least say some quick hellos, and then we'll jump right into the Q&A. So I'm Zenobia Gottschalk. I run communications for Hedera, and I am here today with Leemon and Mance. We would like to just thank you all for joining us. We know these are unusual times. We are thinking about our community. We appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. And we also just wanted to reach out. So it's, you know, it's an opportunity. We appreciate everybody who sent in questions. We're gonna try to get through as many of these as we can today in a speed round, if you will, and we will continue to do this. So we have seen some great response from the community, some great interest, and we're gonna try to make this a regular thing, both in quarantine and potentially beyond. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. Leemon, we received a number of questions about milestones on the roadmap around mirror nodes, state proofs, open source, open review. Can you just give us the latest update?
Oh, sure. So, you know, we're continuing to do things. We rolled out HCS recently. We have a bunch of stuff that we've done recently. And we've got a number of things that we're working on right now that we're adding. So the mirror nodes. I love that we have third parties running mirror nodes, and we are running one too. And we have a bunch of different ways we want to improve those. We will be coming out right now, it's the mirror node alpha, but we'll have a mirror node beta, and then it will continue beyond that. And it should make it easier for people to run it. It should make it faster. It should make it better in various ways. So one of the things we want to do is improve the mirror nodes, get to the mirror node beta. And we want to make the network itself more reconfigurable with less human interaction when nodes connect and reconnect and so on. And so we'll be working on doing that and tuning it in various ways. We will have more wallet integrations. So we already have some wallets, hardware wallets, software wallet. We have wallets that work with HBARs that are third-party wallets. And we will continue to integrate more into those. I love the way the ecosystem is building up, and I want to just continue to see that. And so we'll continue integrating with more wallets, hardware wallets, software wallets, and so on, custody services, which I guess are human wallets. I don't know what you call those. All that stuff. We want to integrate with all of those. State proofs. So when you call it and ask Hedera, what is my balance? If you don't trust that node, you could ask several nodes, but really what you want to do is get a state proof. So we're working on that. You'll be able to get a state proof, and it'll cryptographically prove to you that the node isn't lying. And same thing with mirror nodes. You'll be able to cryptographically know that the mirror node's not lying. I love that. So we're working on state proofs. And I think we had a webinar where I went through in detail what state proofs are. The Road to Decentralization had it. So we're working on that. And then fun one is open source, open review. The consensus layer of the Hashgraph and the gossip is going to be released. The source code will be released where you can read it. It'll be open review. You can download it. Anonymous people can download it and read it and recompile it and see what it is and how it works and what it's doing. And that'll be good. And then other components we are open sourcing. And so same thing, anybody can download it anonymously and read it and recompile it and so on, and also just be part of an open source community and build on top of it in various ways. And so we're looking forward to that. Those are some of the things that we have that we're working on, and we'll be rolling those out as they're ready.
Great, thank you, Leemon. We have a related question. Before that, I just want to note that this is being recorded, and we will post the recording on the YouTube channel for anyone who is just listening or can't stay on for the whole time. But Leemon, following up on that, what's the criteria for mainnet exiting beta status?
Oh, well, that's just a word. So right now, there are a number of features we want to add to mainnet and release the source code. Those things are real things that we are planning to do. At some point, we'll stop calling it beta and start calling it V1. I don't really know when that will be. It's not particularly tied to those concrete things. Yeah, at some point we'll call it that. I know Google calls things beta for years and years and years, but we'll probably do it shorter than that. But the important thing are the features that we're adding, and I don't know at what point we'll just start calling it version 1.
All right, thanks, Leemon. Next one is for you, Mance. What are Hedera's plans for weathering a global depression should one come? And I don't think quite related, but same questioner asks, can you really get to thousands of TPS to drive revenue?
Okay, two sort of related questions, actually. So first off, Hedera is not about to run out of cash. We have plenty of cash on hand to carry us into next year. And as we previously reported, we decided to go ahead and raise an additional $10 million while allowing for the possibility of extending that to 15 million. That amount carries us into Q4 of next year. While we aren't in the business of selling HBAR, and we do so on a limited but compliant way, regulatory compliant way, we've always been very concerned about being as compliant as is possible. What we found is that there's strong demand for the HBAR. We're in the process now of closing that first 10 million, and a significant portion of the additional 5 has already been allocated, and I'm expecting to close the additional 5. So that's just to comment very briefly on our cash position. Second, there are really 2 primary metrics that we use when measuring the success of the project: decentralization and usage. And from the beginning, we've focused on a decentralized governance model for making decisions that impact the network, for governing the network. The council is now fully functional. The interim board was dissolved at the end of last year, at the end of December, and the first fully elected board took control in January. The council manages treasury. They determine the product roadmap, and they provide oversight of every part of the organization. The council is operational. The council is distributed, and it's distributed across geographies. It's distributed across industries. So there is no single point of failure today in the network from a governance perspective, from an operational perspective. And importantly, the Hedera staff continues to relinquish more and more control of operations to the council, and that process will continue. So decentralization is going very well. What about usage? Many of you have heard me say before, the performance improvements in Hashgraph are like the difference between a calculator and a computer. The applications that one builds for a computer are going to be very different than those applications that get built for a calculator. And much of the DLT industry is now seeing in Hedera a computer for the very first time. So the strategy is pretty simple. We've identified 4 broad categories of uses of the Hedera consensus service specifically, but the platform more generally. These aren't 4 use cases, but rather 4 focus areas that will have interest from different types of stakeholders. Some will appeal to architects. For example, we just announced this week that we have the plugin to Hyperledger Fabric that is now in the labs of Hyperledger and is out there for people to download and use and contribute to. We can think of HCS in this context as layer 0, the consensus layer for distributed ledger implementations. And we're building a set of tools and microservices that will appeal to developers, making it easier for them to build solutions that business users will care about. For each of these focus areas, we're developing demos, documentation, and also working with customers to build initial reference implementations. So in other words, in this year, 2020, we're demonstrating how a computer is different than a calculator. And in 2021, our channel partners will use these reference accounts and reference implementations to scale the usage of the platform. So yes, we are moving towards significant usage. Now, all of that sounds very abstract, and I realize this is turning into a long answer. I'll try to be brief. All of that's sounding very abstract, but let me try to make it concrete with an example. Yesterday and today, you're seeing press that's talking about the Coupon Bureau. The Coupon Bureau is a nonprofit service organization for the coupon industry. The advisory committee for the Coupon Bureau includes Target and General Mills and GS1. It's an important standards body for the industry. And they're working with leading consumer packaged goods manufacturers that provide, and accelerators that provide access to point of sale systems at leading retailers that represent nearly 70% of the US retail market. There are about 250 billion coupons registered every year in the United States. And the systems that they use are ancient, they're antiquated, they're very inefficient, and they're rife with fraud. The Coupon Bureau is working with us using HCS to modernize that. And they are making it possible using HCS for those manufacturers to register their coupons with the Coupon Bureau. The transactions, the coupons being used at the point of sale systems will flow through HCS, through Hedera, and then back to the Coupon Bureau, and their database of coupons gets updated appropriately. The manufacturers will run mirror notes, so they'll have transparency into what it is that they are, the coupons that are being used. It reduces fraud. It provides an opportunity for analytics that didn't previously exist. It makes the settlement process extremely efficient compared to the weeks or months that it takes today. And it's going to result in a lot of TPS. It's a use case that you could not implement on Ethereum, right? Not in the same way that we're talking about implementing it on HCS. It's these types of use cases that are really high throughput, that require tiny cost. I mean, you couldn't have a cost of a quarter for to register or log a coupon that gives you a 50-cent discount, right? The economics don't work. So to finish up, decentralization, we've made great strides in. Usage, we are well on our way. We expect to see TPS scale. And so, yes, I absolutely expect to see high TPS. And the Coupon Bureau is just one example of a slew of examples that we have in the pipeline that we'll be announcing more and more of as we get through this year. Okay, that was long-winded, but I hopefully that was helpful.
I love that story that they're working on. Leemon, the next one is for you. What is your impression of the ecosystem building around Hedera?
I love this. So we're not doing everything. We have this whole ecosystem of people around us, third parties, people we don't even know that are building things as part of building up the ecosystem. They're building the infrastructure that uses Hedera. So I mentioned wallets. I love that we have both hardware wallets and software wallets out there because those are both very important. You have to have those. And I would encourage, if you have large amounts, think about using a hardware wallet. That's a really good thing to use. And if it's small amounts, you need to use it frequently, then use a software wallet. Well, we have those. We have a software wallet that we wrote ourselves, but the plan from the beginning has been to use the ecosystem to let other people do it. And we're, as much as we can, trying to emphasize these other third-party wallets now that are integrated with us so that we don't have to do the wallet. We'd rather have the community doing it. And so we're really excited about that. We also have exchanges now, dozens of exchanges and OTC desks, so that people can buy HBARs or trade HBARs or convert them back and forth with other things. Some exchanges will create an account for you. Some exchanges will let you use a credit card. Some exchanges only do pairs, but if you already have something else, you can trade it for HBARs and vice versa. And I love that. We have dozens of them now. And it's on our website. If you go to hedera.com/HBARs, it lists a whole bunch of exchanges. We don't know if any of these are good or bad. I mean, we're not endorsing them, and I'm not even sure it's a complete list. But whenever we've heard about an exchange, we put it on the list and we get a link to their website and you can go see if they're good or bad. But I love that. I mean, if there were only 3, we actually would have investigated them, but there's 27 of them now and it keeps growing. And so I love that we're growing that way. There are custody services now, third-party custody. Maybe you have a lot of money in HBARs and you don't really want to trust taking care of the key yourself. You'd rather have someone else who is trustworthy protect the key and make sure you don't lose it and make sure it isn't stolen. So now there's custody services, and HBARs have been integrated into custody services. That's just an important part of the ecosystem. And so I love that that is there now. I think there are a lot of use cases where somebody will want to use that. There are other cases where you wouldn't want to. You know, you could use a hardware wallet and you could have keep it in a bank safe and have it multi-key because we have multi-key accounts and store them in different bank safes. You could use these cool things that let you store your key phrase or your mnemonic phrase in pieces of metal or stamp it into metal and bury it in your backyard. There's all sorts of fun things you can do. But we're happy that there's this ecosystem out there. That last one is, of course, isn't for us. Anybody who uses BIP39 words can use those metal things, but we can too. And it's really cool to use those. They weren't made for us, but they're great because we're compliant. We're BIP39, so it's the same list of words. You could use those. There's the SDKs. So we have a Java SDK to allow developers to make calls to the API, which I think is important. And we will continue adding to that. We're not going to abandon that. You know, we'd like to no longer have to maintain our own wallet, but we will continue to add code to the SDK. But there's also third-party SDKs now in other languages and with other philosophies for how it's designed. And I love that. The community is building SDKs in addition to our SDK. And that's fantastic. And then, of course, the broader ecosystem is we now have plugins that will allow you to use one of these systems that would have allowed you to build a private network. And then with the flip of a switch with a plugin, you turn the private network into an AppNet. And that is incredibly exciting to me. It's a game changer because now, if you have Hyperledger, you just flip a switch, plug in a plugin, and now it's an AppNet and you have the trust of Hedera behind your sort of private Hyperledger. It gives you the privacy of a private network, but it gives you the trust of a public network. Very cool. And so we have plugins now for Ethernet, for Ethereum, and for Corda R3, Corda. So I think this is really exciting because we want an ecosystem that doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. And there are so many wheels already built for those two things, for Hyperledger Fabric and for Corda. And so for Hyperledger and for Corda, there's these huge things out there, and we've already now built plugins for them, and you can use them to build these things and monitoring tools and management tools, all that. And so we're now combining with other ecosystems, and so those ecosystems apply to us. Just like the metal things for keeping your key phrase, well, now we have all the tools for Hyperledger and all the tools for Corda you can use. But that's just starting, and we're continuing to see this grow, and I just want to thank everyone who's involved in the ecosystem and enjoy working with you.
Awesome, Leemon, thank you. Okay, Mance, I'm going to lob the next one over to you. How happy are you with the current progress of Hedera as a whole? Are there any areas you feel have exceeded your expectations, or any areas where you feel more progress needs to be made? With a number of things listed on here, but including business goals.
Business goals, okay. So here's how I think about the company and its life cycle. It's in sort of phases by year. In 2017, we of course began to envision what a public ledger would look like built on top of Hashgraph. We pulled together the initial team and we started writing everything down. Software had already been being built. Software started getting built way back in 2015 and 16. And so, you know, 2017 was all about vision and just the beginnings of execution. 2018, we introduced Hedera to the world for the first time. We raised money and we launched the mainnet. And so those were big milestones for the company. In 2019, we operationalized the council. We had the first council meeting in February of 2019. The council has grown significantly since that time. And we launched the mainnet. I mean, we opened the mainnet for use in September of 2019. 2020 is about validation. It's the year of validation for the technology. It's the year of validation for the uses that we envision and the go-to-market strategy, the business model effectively. It's the year of validation for us in that context. We're very excited about the work that we've done so far and what we intend to do this year. 2021 is the year of scale. So the work that we're doing now, as I'd said before, is laying the groundwork for real uses, real use cases that can be used as reference use cases for scaling the company through our channel partners. That starts in 2021. So am I happy with where we are? I'm ecstatic with where we are. Are there areas where we could do better? And maybe where's there friction? Maybe I'll characterize it that way. When we first started, we didn't know for sure that we could get the caliber of council member that we wanted. We set the bar very high in terms of council membership. And look, there is a very big difference between Facebook going and soliciting a bunch of partners to create the council that is in Libra, the equivalent, and a couple of guys with some cool tech and an audacious vision trying to do the same thing. But we've done it. And so on the one hand, you know, I'm amazed and we're very happy with where we are. On the other hand, it's taken longer to pull that off than we expected it to take. We always knew that getting the first 5 would be the hardest, getting the next 5 would be a little easier, and after that it would be easier still. In one sense, that's true. In another sense, it just takes time to work through the process that we have to go through with each council member. This is not a marketing agreement that we're signing with these council members. We go through M&A, we go through significant due diligence, and often it's the case that a CEO or a board is signing off on this council member's participation in the council. So when we make an announcement, it's very real in a way that perhaps is different than maybe some others. And so the process is taking longer, but when the announcements are made, the quality is very high. So we're sacrificing time for quality. And I think it's a good trade-off. So yes, this is the one area where I'd like to see things move faster, is in fleshing out the council. We've got a great pipeline and council members still to be announced. But I would love to see, that we're at 39 by the end of the year. My guess is it's going to take into 2021 to finish that part of the rollout.
All right, thanks, Mance. Leemon, next one for you. Can you improve communication around testnet changes?
Oh yeah, so we need to. So what we've realized recently is that the system we have now is not at all good, and we're changing it radically. So here's what we have. The problem is it was too successful. Hate it when that happens. So the plan was, we had this mainnet. It's important, the world cares about it, but we don't want to just spring changes on people. We want developers to see when there's going to be a change coming to mainnet. So what we would do is we'd stand up a testnet, and we would frequently reset the testnet and start over at the genesis and erase the state, and we would frequently change the code on it. And the idea would be that the testnet would update, and then you'd have a while before the mainnet updated so that you could prepare for it and know that it's coming. The whole point of the testnet was to give you good communication about mainnet. Hey, that worked, but it worked really well. In fact, it worked too well. People started using testnet really seriously. I didn't really think that would happen, but it did. And people now are using it so seriously, it's actually disruptive to them when we suddenly change the code in testnet or reset it back to the initial state or whatever, because they're actually using it in their development process in a way that was even bigger than we had anticipated. So what we are going to do is stand up a preview net. And so now the preview net will reset frequently and without warning, and we'll have new code to give you a warning about what's about to come to the testnet. And then the testnet, when it finally changes, is itself acting as a warning of what's about to come to the mainnet. So we've added an extra stage to the pipeline. And so now it's going to be the preview net that changes without warning and is, it itself is the warning for the next net in the stage, in the pipeline. But the test net now will be treated like something that matters to people in its own right. and the state will reset less frequently, and we'll try to give people warning before the state resets, and the code will change less frequently. We'll try to give people warning before the code changes. And the preview net will now be the test net for the test net. And so, so I apologize that we did not have good communication for what testnet ended up being. And I think now with the preview net, it will be what needs to come before the testnet. So that's the change that we're making. Big change.
Thanks, Leemon. We had a few questions on that, so appreciate you answering that one. Mance, how do you balance the long-term goal to establish the trust layer of the internet where anyone can carve out a piece of cyberspace, and the short-term strategy to target big enterprises? How can the two communities be enabled to work together?
Right. Well, I have a couple of thoughts. First off, what we're building is infrastructure. And the infrastructure is the same infrastructure that gets used by both camps, so to speak. I mean, maybe we think of the two camps as enterprise and entrepreneurs. That maybe is an interesting way of drawing the line. AWS, for example, AWS S3 and EC2, the services of AWS are used by both. They're used by enterprises and they're used by entrepreneurs. And so in that sense, the work that we're doing is the same work for both camps, or both personas that we're talking about here. Second, most of the entrepreneurs that I talk to are big dreamers. They have huge visions. And so what we're building and proving and hardening with the enterprises is a platform that supports big ideas and big visions. And so if we can climb that mountain, then what we've built is something that benefits both enterprises and entrepreneurs alike. So all the work that we're doing supports both visions. The needs of hardcore, mission critical, high volume use cases that are sometimes unique to enterprises, but it's the same infrastructure that will provide the same level of performance for the entrepreneurs that are wanting to build that same level of vision. The two can work together in using the same sets of tools and working in the same forums together, and where the discussions are being had about how to use the technology, and the developers groups and all of those equivalents, where the hard-fought lessons are recorded for the larger developer community to take advantage of. But it's the same tech that provides the same benefit for both groups.
Thanks, Mance. Leemon, how do you expect usage to change or grow in the future?
This is where the pipeline comes in that we've been talking about. So like the Coupon Bureau and AdStacks and Hero and these other people that are bringing in transactions, and we expect to have those continue to grow. We have a pipeline, and we continue to expect to continue to get more and more people building on top of us. We expect them to be doing POCs and proving it out throughout this year, and growing, making it really production next year for a lot of companies. We expect that it will be growing. What's interesting is that this growth really has ended up showing us an interest in HCS, in the consensus service. And so like the Coupon Bureau is going to be using the consensus service. We're seeing that lots of people want to use the consensus service. And if you look at our current throughput, which is great, we're getting lots of transactions per second. I like that. We're going to get a lot more in the near future, I think. But the ones that we're getting, if you look at how they break down, say, well, it's mostly cryptocurrency transfers. But if you look at how they're actually being used, you discover, and we discovered this, that they were people using it as if it were a consensus service even before we had the consensus service. It was market validation that people wanted the consensus service, that they were actually using our cryptocurrency to act like a consensus service. They were sending microscopic amounts of HBARs for no reason other than to have that memo field forever recorded. In other words, they were using it like a message, like a topic and messages flowing through it, like an HCS, like a consensus service with only one topic. And you had to pay one tiny bar every time you used it just to get a cryptocurrency transfer to go through, but it was the memo field that you cared about. Of course, it was limited to only 100 bytes. You had only one topic. It wasn't a very good consensus service, and even then, people were building companies on it. And so now that we've actually deployed the consensus service, lots of people are saying, great, we would rather now just use the real consensus service. So I think what you'll see over time is that cryptocurrency will go down and HCS will go up. Consensus service will go up. And then in the long term, I suppose both of them will go up, but HCS will go up more, would be my guess, because we are just seeing this overwhelming demand for this consensus service. It's a different kind of thing, and it allows you to build app nets with this property, combination of properties that's unusual. And so people are very interested in that. And then it drives great throughput, great transactions per second. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing how it ends up growing and what new kinds of projects end up building on it.
That's exciting. Thanks, Leemon. Okay, Mance, relative to other crypto projects that have launched recently, Hedera has been slow to be listed on some fiat on-ramps such as Kraken, Coinbase, or Gemini. Why do you think this is?
Yeah, so when we first began engaging or discussing with the exchanges what it takes to integrate support for HBAR, what we learned is that their processes really were designed for a blockchain. All of them, right? All of them have processes that were designed to easily integrate blockchains, and blockchains have a certain set of properties and look a certain way that is fundamentally different than a hash graph. And so yes, it has taken longer with some of the exchanges than it would have taken if we were not a hash graph, if we were a blockchain. We still have a good list of exchanges. We are striving for coverage first. We want to have exchanges, representative exchanges in all of the relevant geographies and jurisdictions, so that those that need it to get the HBAR for use on the platform have the ability to do so. But the work that is required to do the integration is continuing, and the exchanges are learning what is required on their end to integrate support for something like Hedera or Hashgraph, and so that's all it is. I mean, there will continue to be additional exchanges that come online as that work gets completed, and you know, it's just been a process that is unusual. We're sort of an outlier in terms of what the exchanges are used to seeing and dealing with. So it's taken a little extra time because of that.
Got it. Thanks, Mance. Leemon, someone asked a question about how time works for our consensus timestamps. Can you elaborate?
Oh, fun. Okay. So this is cool. And it's worth talking about because time is an important thing in these sorts of things. And it reminds me of another question someone said recently is, why are you using time at all? Couldn't you get consensus with Hashgraph without even having clocks on your computers? And the answer is yes. So if all of our computers in the whole network broke at the same moment and all their clocks broke and they all said the current time is 0 and they just said that forever, it would still work. We would still get consensus. We would still put all of our transactions in a consensus order. Everybody would agree on the consensus order. We would get consensus just as fast. The latency wouldn't be any worse. We would still be ABFT. It'd be hard for someone to stop us from coming to consensus, hard for someone to make us come to different consensuses. All those good properties would continue. We would have the things that people look for in a blockchain, you know, the things that people expect from a ledger, would have those things. But we wouldn't be as good. If we didn't have those clocks, if the clocks were all saying the time is 0, then the first transaction would have a consensus timestamp of 0. And then the next one would be 1 nanosecond later. I mean, we do have in the code, we say, well, we'll always have the timestamps moving forward on each transaction. But if all the clocks were broken and just given as zeros, then each transaction would just be exactly 1 nanosecond later than the previous one. And so you'd start with a time of 0, which doesn't mean anything. And then each transaction would have a time 1 nanosecond later, which doesn't mean anything. But if we have clocks, then we can get a consensus timestamp. And so if you have some legal contract that says you have to release certain information by noon on Tuesday, you can use that timestamp to prove that it was by noon on Tuesday. That's something you couldn't do with broken clocks. It's kind of nice to have non-broken clocks. And you know, our clocks may not be perfect. Maybe everybody is trying to get the time on their computer, but the computers have slightly different times. You know, we all go out to time servers and get times from different time servers, and we're slightly off, and there's delays, and there's some randomness involved, and maybe the clock in your computer runs fast or runs slow. And so we all have the time that's more or less right, but there's some random noise added to each person. In that case, the consensus timestamp works better than any single clock. It's the median of all the clocks. So if each of them is the time plus some random noise, it kind of averages out the random noise, or medians out the random noise. And so you can actually have a more accurate median than all the individual ones. Wow, fingers don't work so well. You know, everybody's doing things from home now, and backdrops are kind of weird. Look at my fingers, isn't that weird? They disappear. So if you have a whole bunch of timestamps from different computers with different random errors, and then you take the median, that's the middle one if you were to sort it, the median is more accurate than any given computer, which is kind of cool. It just sort of averages out the error, medians out the error. Furthermore, if you have some computers that are malicious and they on purpose are wrong, and they're wrong by 1,000,000 years, median's pretty good. And somebody saying, I was 1,000,000 years ago, or I was 1,000,000 years in the future, just has a little bit of influence. That's the magic of a median. The median is really good at excluding outliers. They have some influence. Everybody should have a say, but not very much. And so the timestamp ends up being reliable as long as most of the computers are mostly right. You end up with a really good, trustworthy timestamp. And so, you know, you could have a computer on Mars and it would still work. You could have computers that are malicious and it would still work. You could have one computer where the clock just breaks and always says 0, and it still works. That's kind of the idea. And then something that I just think is fun. Oh, but for that part, we actually had a blog post on fairness, which talks a lot about time. And it shows graphs of how the median works and how the timestamps work and how time is used in Hedera. And sure, we don't have to use time, but we wouldn't have timestamps. We wouldn't have fairness. The fairness is really important. And so that's why we use time, to get timestamps and to have fairness of ordering and fairness of timestamps. But the other thing I think is just kind of fun is it always bothered me that Star Trek always had these things called Stardates that everyone in the galaxy agrees on. You know, general relativity says that if all the stars are moving relative to each other, that we can't all agree on a universal clock. That's actually one of the results of relativity. So Stardates don't actually work. It's probably the only thing in Star Trek that's not realistic, but that part was, you know, not good physics. And if you wanted to have a galactic-wide, galaxy-wide civilization where everybody agrees on timestamps and on order. I mean, general relativity says you and I can't even agree on order if we're moving relative to each other. I think X happened before Y, and you think Y happened before X, and Einstein says we're both right. Crazy. Relativity of simultaneity blows your mind. No one really can grasp that. But what we could do is if the Federation were to use Hedera as a global timestamp, then they could get star dates that everybody agrees on. So clearly the Federation needs to use Hedera for their star dates.
Thanks, Leemon. I hope they can weave that into a future episode. I love it. Okay, Mance, suppose I want to buy 50,000 worth of HBARs. Can I purchase them directly from Hedera instead of paying exchange fees? Are there better fiat on-ramps where I can buy in bulk?
Yeah, so we just touched on this briefly earlier, and that is that hedera.com/HBAR has a list of resources. Some of those are exchanges, others are OTC desks. Of course, an OTC desk can do a 50K transaction easily with a relatively low rate for the transaction. We don't sell, we don't sell HBAR directly. We are in this fundraising round that we're talking about now. The standards are really high on the eligible counterparties for this. So we started off meeting a certain standard when we believe that the token was not the token, but the SAPs were securities. There's certain requirements for counterparties in that type of transaction. Now we're looking at CFTC level requirements for counterparties, and they're an order of magnitude higher. So that's difficult, but the OTC desks can handle a $50,000 transfer pretty simply. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, Leemon, a security one. What's a timeline to have support for the RSA and EC keys on the Hedera network?
Oh, I don't know if we'll ever bother with that. So what we hear is that people would like to use ED 25519, which is what we use. That's the standard out there, and there's a reason for it. RSA, if you want to be CNSA compliant, has 3,000 bits, 3072. It's more than 3,000 bits, 3 kilobits, whereas it's only 32 bytes, 64 bytes for a signature for ED 25519. So you can have signatures that are much, much tinier for what we're using right now. We may eventually expose it to users and let users use gigantic signatures if they really want to. I'm not really sure if anybody cares if they would want to. On the other hand, internally in the network, we've always used RSA, and we have elliptic curve is also supported, curves that are then compliant with the CNSA standard. So we wanted to be compliant with the security standard. So internally we have support for ECDSA and we have support for RSA, and we use big keys. Some people would say overkill, but we use big keys because it makes us compliant with these standards for security. For external people, when you're just creating accounts and you want to put keys on them and you're making signatures, you use ED 25519. It's clearly the standard within this community. And if I were to add another crypto system today, I probably wouldn't add RSA or ECDSA. I'd probably add something else because maybe something with aggregate signatures like BLS or something else. I don't know. I would add something else. I have not seen a strong demand for people who really want to pay for gigantic signatures and pay for gigantic keys. Just not a lot of demand there for that. If we ever got a lot of demand, then we could add that feature too. It's not hard to add it. I mean, it's already what we use internally, but I don't know. If you want to do 10,000 transactions a second or more, you really don't want to have these gigantic signatures floating around. You'd rather have tiny signatures. And so people tend to like tiny signatures. And maybe in a couple of years, we'll go to a post-quantum signature. But we can wait for NIST to finish its contest for that. Those sadly will be bigger, and that'll be an option. I don't know how many people will use that option because post-quantum is going to be inherently bigger, but maybe not too much bigger. But so yeah, if we hear lots of people saying they really want it, then maybe we'll add it. But for the moment, it's just something we might add someday.
All right. Mance, going to get your wisdom on this next one. How do you think central banks will respond to digital currencies in terms of the COVID pandemic? And to what extent do you ultimately see a global currency being safe and desirable?
So I do think that CBDCs, of course, are inevitable. Will COVID accelerate the adoption of CBDCs? That's a harder question. What I do think is more likely to accelerate the adoption of CBDCs is simply the fact that China is almost there. And so, yes, the governments are going to move quickly because China is taking the lead in this case. And COVID maybe will help hasten the end of paper and metal cash, right? What we think of as, old school fiat. But people will continue to use credit cards and ultimately their phones. And much of the world already does use their phone almost exclusively, right? There's in parts of Asia, they're ahead of us here in the United States. So, so the two are sort of orthogonal, the COVID and its impact and adoption of CBDCs by federal governments or central governments. They are related in a sense in that maybe COVID will drive the desire not to use cash but China is going to drive the world to CBDC adoption.
All right. And while we were on the topic, Mance, we have a related question. Are there any repercussions if the Chinese government pursued a CBDC using JointGraph?
Yeah, sure, there are repercussions. It instantly makes Hashgraph the most important distributed consensus algorithm on the planet, right? Hands down, done. Full stop. I assume the question really is talking about IP or things like that, and I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, it'd be fascinating to learn if China is in fact going to use Hashgraph. Frankly, I've learned what I know because of what's been posted in the Telegram community. And so the community here has helped educate me personally. Maybe there are others within the team that knew about JointGraph before Telegram knew about JointGraph. And so it is fascinating to see how things are unfolding here. And, you know, frankly, if the community comes across new bits of information, I certainly welcome that as well. So.
All right. Leemon, we have one here on state size. Will state size increase over time with more users and nodes on the network, given that the network gets more secure and performant over time with user growth?
Well, sure. So I would expect state size to increase. I'd expect throughput to increase, and you know, number of TPS that we're seeing to increase, and I would expect the network itself to become faster over time. It's interesting, though, how they interact with each other. So because of the way that Hedera is built, transactions themselves don't overwhelm us. The state size is controlled by how many accounts are there, how many files are there, how many HCS topics are there. But it's not affected by how many HCS messages flow through those, or how many cryptocurrency transfers shuffle HBARs between those accounts. And so what you find is that the state grows as we have more of these entities, the accounts and the topics and the smart contracts. But the state doesn't grow just as a function of having lots of TPS, lots of transactions per second. And so what I expect is, yes, we will see more entities. There will be more accounts, there will be more HCS topics. But that growth will be dwarfed by the growth in the usage of those accounts and the usage of those topics. I think we'll see a greater increase in throughput than we do in the state size growing, which is nice because you don't have infinite memory. It's nice to have the state growing more slowly than the usage of that state. So that's kind of how I would expect it to be going in the future as we go forward.
Got it. Mance, question from some of our community. I'm non-technical. What can I do as a community member to help Hedera?
Yes, well, to start, you don't have to be technical to be an ambassador for the company, right? The ambassadors have been very helpful. They're active on Telegram and Twitter. They talk to their friends and colleagues about Hedera. They offer their support to one another. And so first off, thank you to the ambassador group that exists today. We value the work that you do for us, and it's important and meaningful and has helped us get to where we are today. And for those of you that are interested in taking a more active role in the ecosystem, then just let us know. And we can talk to you about what that might look like in that type of program.
All right. Leemon, we have a EVM question. With EVM constantly evolving, what versions of EVM will Hedera use? And will it always go in the same direction as Ethereum?
Okay, so we have Solidity smart contracts, and they're compatible. And of course, the community that uses Solidity is going to later and later versions of it. We will follow that path, not in lockstep, but we will periodically upgrade to a more recent version to be compatible with that. We have no interest in diverging in changing it to now have a fork where there's two different kinds of Solidity and they aren't interoperable. We have no interest in doing that. We want to, I hate it when that kind of thing happens. We don't want to splinter the Solidity world. And so we will always be compatible with Solidity. And when Solidity evolves to its next version, eventually we'll do so too. We're not in any particular hurry to do so right away and to always have the latest version, but we'll over time continue to go to more and more recent versions of it for our Solidity support. We may even someday go to other languages as well. But it's interesting. A developer is very constrained if they have to live within a smart contract language. And what would be better is if you just have freedom to use any language you want. And that's what AppNets give you. That's what our consensus service gives you. And so we've put a lot of effort into the consensus service right now, like plugins to Hyperledger Fabric and plugins to Corda, which allow you to, very easily build this using whatever language you like. You don't have to use any particular language, and we don't have to support it. You can use this whole ecosystem that already exists. And so I suspect, as we've already seen, we'll see more and more people switching to HCS, the consensus service. But we will keep the smart contracts. We're not going to take them away. There are cases where you want a smart contract, and we'll still have it. And we will not poison the well by making our own weird variant of Solidity. We will always use the standard Solidity that other people are using. And, we may be a few versions behind, but we'll probably keep it, improving periodically to be catching up on the versions. But it's not a huge emphasis for us right now because of all the interest we're getting in, well, I want to write in any language I want. And, that's nice. So that's kind of what we're emphasizing at the moment.
All right. We are getting close to the top of the hour. We definitely have a backlog of questions that were submitted beforehand, and we are also seeing a number of questions in the chat. We are, I think, overwhelmed by this response, and so we will definitely continue to do these sessions. What I want to close out with a couple fun ones that we were asked here. Leemon, what is your favorite computer game?
Yeah, so way back when I got my first computer as a TRS-80, I loved the text adventures. Anybody remember that? But those are fun. And even more recent versions of text adventures like Photopia are really cool. But I remember Adventure International had all those back then. In the modern era, then I liked Myst and I liked Riven, those more recent ones, and I like current ones. I enjoy playing those sorts of things, adventure games. I enjoyed Portal when it came out, and Portal 2, and then the one for the Vive that's a 3D version of it. Those were really fun. I think what I liked best about them wasn't the puzzles, but just the dialogue. I just really thought it was funny. They had a great way of doing that. Most video games, I really don't like the cutscenes. I think that it's not a good movie, it's not a good video game. But with Portal, I loved the audio going in the background. It was just funny. But more recently, what I've been more interested in, actually RPGs are kind of fun too. Oblivion and then in next one and so on, those are kind of fun. But Minecraft I thought was fun. I've enjoyed Minecraft, believe it or not. We have someone in our company who's done some amazing stuff with Redstone. I don't do all that stuff. I'm just kind of doing boring stuff, but it's fun. What I have been recently looking at though is the Quest. The Oculus Quest is fun. It is not the best graphics card in the world, but it's wireless and it's inside-out tracking. And I think wireless and inside-out tracking is far better than having the world's best graphics card. I'd rather have lower poly, but have wireless and inside-out. And so the Quest is fantastic. And so the last game I played that I really liked was The Room VR. So if you've ever played The Room on a tablet or on a phone, they did a really good job of porting it into 3D. And so I just thought that was a really fun, it's a puzzle game, just a really fun game. So that's what I've been playing with. Never really been into first-person shooters, never been into racing games, but I really have enjoyed the ones that I just talked about.
Thanks, Leemon. And we also have a similar, what is Mance's favorite hobby?
Well, as far as hobbies go, I think probably the one that would be closest is the interest in motorcycles. So I like to work on old school motorcycles. I have an old Royal Enfield. For those of you that know that brand, when you think of old World War II movies and you've seen the old military bikes, the drab olive green military bikes with the sidecar. That's it. And even this year, I've spent months getting the one that I have up and running, and it's now running. It's done, and I've been taken out for rides in the middle of the pandemic. You know, it's an opportunity just to get out of the house and stay on the streets and be safe. But so that's a real interest. The old school bikes, in terms of modern bikes, the one that I've had my eye on for some time, haven't pulled the trigger on, would be the Ducati Diavel. I think those are just way cool. And it is something that appeals to my kids a little more than the old Royal Enfield. So I like the bikes.
Very cool. And as we are all sort of adapting to this new world and this new schedule and this new, stay at home, can each of you just share, a quick anecdote, a day in the life of Mance Harmon, a day in the life of Leemon Baird, either pre or post-COVID, your choice.
COVID hasn't actually changed it very much. I just walk at home instead of at the office. So every day I am working on making new algorithms for little pieces of the Hedera system. That comes up all the time in architecting little things and architecting our new features and those sorts of things. I love that. That is so much fun. And that is not the majority of my time. The majority of my time ends up being endless meetings on phone calls. And what I do is I walk. I walk while I'm doing math. Math is fun, and I enjoy walking while I do that. But I also walk when I'm on the phone, and I will walk 5 or 10 miles a day in little tiny circles in my living room. It's terrible. And I used to walk little tiny circles in my office, or I'd walk through the office, walk through all the hallways. But now I walk in little tiny circles in my living room, which is good exercise. But that's my typical day. But then I also have time to take breaks and do fun things like math and even some programming. I like coding, but not enough of those things.
Mance, how about you?
Yeah, well, so we share that in terms of the pacing. So I'm on the phone all the time, similar to Leemon, and pacing endlessly. It's different now because I'm at home, so I'm either walking outside or around the house as opposed to pacing around the office. What's my typical day like? The days and the nights are all about the same. It's you're on 24/7, and so there's always work to be done. You're always on the phone. You're always on the computer. While Leemon focuses, of course, on the tech, I am working with on the business side and all the other stuff that is important for operations and legal and council and board meetings and all of that. So it's very far removed from where we started years ago, building algorithms for machine learning and reinforcement learning. And but the days all look, the same. And certainly more so now in the middle of the pandemic than before. The days just sort of blend together, and it's an endless series of conversations while walking around the house. Kind of a boring existence, to be honest with you.
Well, I think
that's where the hobbies come in.
Relate.
That's where the hobbies come in. Motorcycles, and I'm a foodie, so we cook good food.
Yes. Well, I want to thank both of you for your time. I want to thank the community. For those of you who submitted questions beforehand, thank you so much. For those of you who submitted them now, we will definitely capture them, and we will also likely send out the form again so that we can continue to get these questions from the community. I think especially now when we're not able to travel and see people in person and, see everyone's smiling faces and engage in one-on-one dialogue. This is really important, and we appreciate everybody taking the time. We hope that this has been useful, and we look forward to chatting with you all again very soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.